All right, my name is Don McClay. I am a member of the Oakland Greens and help out a bit with the Alameda County Greens, which is the actual unit. That's the chapter, if you want, of the Green Party in this area. I got a couple things to say as we talk about this attempt to recall Pamela Price, our district attorney. I would like to say a couple things about crime and situation here in Oakland. For one, yeah, crime is awful. And to say that our police and our elected officials, and I'm talking about the city elected officials and the people who are county supervisors, they're failing, and they've been failing for a long time. And something does need to be done. I think that we should understand that part of the reason that we're here is because a kind of emotional, almost vigilante version of tough on crime has had the dominant voice for a long time. We've been through it all here in California. We've been through, conflated charges. We've been through 3 strikes. And the one thing that we should really understand about all these really harsh punishments and really unforgiving policies is they failed. They failed badly. Part of the reason we have such a crime problem has nothing to do with Pamela Price. It has to do with recidivism. And it also has to do with youth. Part of what has been going on is we've been failing youth. We've been failing generations of youth. We've failed them with substandard schools. We've failed them with substandard opportunities in employment and housing. And in some cases, we also failed their parents. Some people, we failed their grandparents. There are people who live in Oakland who don't really see a lot of advantage to being part of, the normal economy and political structures and education structures, because it was not advantage to them. And that's a reality. We are failing youth. We also fail them when they get in trouble and they get arrested, they get incarcerated. We fail to provide rehabilitation. We fail to get them a path. Some people call it a path back into society. The reality of some of these young people's lives is they were never in society. We need to create space in our community for people to have different lives, productive lives, fruitful and worthwhile lives. Now, when it comes to this subject, the Green Party has been very active. We have been active in restorative justice, which is a very practical way of dealing with things that has a good track record. We've been active in police accountability, which is something that's very needed. And we've also just been active in doing things like trying to get the schools to be more responsive and basically better, the public schools. Not the semi-private schools. So the idea of good schools for everyone, these are old green values, and there's something we've been working on a long time. We've known Pamela for a while. She ran for mayor, she ran for DA before. Pamela has been a hard worker for progressive reform. I'm really glad to have her here. But Pamela Price, it's like you've been in office for less than a year. And she just cannot possibly be responsible for what is over 40 years of neglect. Neglect of that youth, neglect of our social services, neglect of our basic housing situation. We had a police chief here in Oakland used to refer to the high crime rate and the high murder rate is having factors involved, not causes necessarily, but factors involved. And he said that there's very rarely a shooting that took place in Oakland that didn't involve one of a certain number of things: recidivism, homelessness, truancy, school truancy, right? And substance abuse. And I was like, whoa, that's a good list. Boy, I wish we would do something about that. And that does not even fall under the DA's authority. The DA can do a lot in restorative justice. They can do a lot in having more reasonable forms of charging people, trying to get them into programs that would actually give them a chance for rehabilitation. And the DA can also put an end to charging youth as adults, which is one of the real crimes that are being committed against our young people here. And the DA can also do a lot for when it comes to police accountability. Police officers should not feel that they do things that are obviously outside of the law and often outside of common decency. Everyone should be accountable. If I go and beat somebody up, I'm accountable. And the same should happen, even more so, for a person who is wearing a gun and carrying a badge and supposedly representing all of us. Now, I bring that up because I think that has a lot to do with who is suddenly opposed to Pamela. Was a campaign on the radio and the local media almost as soon as she got into office. And I also want to note that the same kind of thing happened over in San Francisco. And the world was coming to an end because, Mr. Chesa Boudin was not hard enough on criminals and yada, yada, yada. And the person that replaced him is dealing with a higher crime rate than he was dealing with. So, it just once again proved to all of us, as if we needed it, that kind of crazy criminals is not tough on crime. It doesn't do anything about crime except make it worse. But the need, I guess, to be anti-progressive, the need to have a certain agenda politically, I really feel it's very opportunistic to kind of narrow in on somebody. Basically, there's a dialogue that's very anti the local so-called progressive politicians who are, some are more progressive than others, but there are people who are frankly reactionary. They don't want progressive politics. And this is, to me, I feel that we should be thinking about protecting what we do. Pamela says protect the win. I also say protect our democracy. We elect people. There's a recall for a reason, and that reason has not happened. Now, I'm also very happy to support Pamela in the reforms that she's been bringing in. And Pamela, if you're ready, I'll give you the floor.
I am ready, I think.
Could we do a drum roll, please?
Not necessary. Not necessary. Thank you for having me, and thank you for, agreeing to convene or being inspired to convene this, because I don't talk a lot about the recall because I'm busy doing my job. And the job that I was elected to do is a very, very taxing, important position that I take very seriously. Thank you for having me. I have been very familiar with the Greens and embraced by the Greens and supported by the Greens, so I appreciate that. In 2022, we took a huge step forward and elected the first Black female district attorney in the history of Alameda County. And I'm the first non-appointed district attorney in 100 years. And that has great significance in a lot of ways, but primarily because people never had the understanding or a reason to look at what the district attorney's office was actually doing, or to understand the scope and the things that are within our jurisdiction. The way that we got here was when Earl Warren was appointed in 1925. He served as the district attorney until 1938. And then when he left, two deputies in the office ran for the seat. And the office, it was very disruptive, very divisive for the office. And so they made this policy, the district attorneys, that before the end of his term, the district attorney would step down and he would retire early and he would nominate his chief deputy to replace him. And then the Board of Supervisors would appoint that person. So for 100 years, we've had appointed district attorneys. So Ralph Hoyt was Earl Warren's chief assistant, and he became the DA in 1938. And then J. Frank Coakley was his chief assistant. He became the DA in 1947. Lowell Jensen followed him in 1969. John Meehan followed him in 1981. They were all chief assistant district attorneys. Tom Orloff passed it down to Nancy O'Malley. And then when I ran in 2017, it was the first time that anyone had challenged any one of these incumbents since 1972. And so what that meant is that for most of us, I came to California in 1978. I had never voted for a DA. I didn't know that there was an opportunity to vote for a DA. I knew what the DA did because I'm a lawyer, but beyond that, and I had a little bit, quite frankly, I didn't know all the things that the DA does, and I wasn't paying attention, like most people. And when I was triggered to run and urged to run in 2017, it was because of the racial disparities. And that is also a big part of the legacy, not only the undemocratic way that the office was administered or that was justice was administered, without people really knowing what was going on. There were huge racial disparities that were created in Alameda County. For instance, in California, 35%, approximately 35% of the people serving life without the possibility of parole after a conviction are Black. In Alameda County, 71% are Black. In Alameda County, 82% of all the people serving sentences of life without the possibility of parole from this county who got that sentence under the age of 21 are Black, 82%. That's the legacy of racial disparities within this county that has gone unexamined, unchallenged, and unaddressed for at least 50 years. And so when I came into office, I walked into an office that had not seen change, an office that was not prepared for change. And we have many people in this county who were invested in the status quo because they participated in it, they profited from it, and they prospered because of it. And those people, many of whom, some of whom worked for the office, they were not prepared for what the community demanded in 2022. And so those folks then, after they got over the shock of losing the election, because they had a candidate, he lost, okay? And after they got over the shock, they immediately started organizing to have a recall. And that's what we see. They went online and they had this petition. They started spreading every kind of false narrative that they could. I remember within the first month of my taking office, I saw a post on Nextdoor that said that I had bought new television sets for all the inmates in Santa Rita County Jail. And then someone confirmed it and said, yes, someone replied to the post. Yes, I confirmed it. It's true. I bought new television sets for every inmate at Santa Rita County Jail within the first month of taking office. I mean, that's how ridiculous they started, and they've persisted with that because it was such a shock to the system. But it was not, I didn't just land, as you all know, I didn't come from Mars. I didn't just jet down here and land. I've been a part of this community. Yes, I'm a founding member of Vukani Mwetu because I was part of the anti-apartheid movement. I have been a community activist since law school. When I came here in 1979, I co-founded with, at that time, the chapter heads of the Peace and Freedom Party in Berkeley. We co-founded Bay Area Defense Committee for Battered Women to challenge what was happening to women in the Alameda County Superior Court system. Both Dale Martin and Angela Davis were on my board, who I recruited them. I've been representing everyday people in this community for 30 years, 30 plus years. The case I went to the United States Supreme Court on was an employment case for a Black electrician who worked at Amtrak's Oakland Yard at night and lived in Hayward. I have been a part of this community. I was pro bono counsel for the Coalition for Police Accountability. I was co-chair of the San Francisco Lawyers for Civil Rights. And yet suddenly on January 3rd, I became this alien person. If you believe the media, I became this alien person that nobody knew and nobody respected, who had done absolutely nothing. And they post all the time how incompetent, heartless, and clueless I am. Okay. And that is nothing but a political attack to try to undermine our administration and to repeal, redo, recall the thing that we accomplished. It was a long time coming, okay? When we look back, the things that I am doing are grounded in the will of the voters of Alameda County. For example, in 2012, I remind people that 78% of us voted in favor of Prop 36. That's 78% of the residents, of the voting people who voted in 2012. We voted for Prop 36 to modify the three strikes law, which we all knew was infamous, and it needed to be changed. In 2014, 74% of us voted in favor of Prop 47 to reduce criminal penalties, because we heard about the outrageous sentences that people were receiving with three strikes and juveniles and a criminal system that had just gone unaddressed for decades. In 2016, 77% of the voters of this county voted in favor of Proposition 57 to stop charging juveniles as adults. That is the will of the voters. Okay. And then in 2018, we had a whole slew of legislation by the state legislature. The state passed SB 1391, the Senate, to restrict juvenile prosecutions by district attorneys across this state, not just Alameda County. And they had hearings and did evidence, and it passed, and the governor signed it. Okay. That same year, Senate Bill 1393 was passed by the state legislature, signed by the governor, to eliminate prison sentence enhancements. Okay. And that was following the first sentencing commission in 2017 that had looked at the criminal penalties and the penal code that for the first time in decades. And then in 2019, SB 136 was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, to eliminate 3-year prior prison enhancements. Okay, this has been a long journey. We are now 10, 12 years after on the journey. In last year, 2022, SB 81, which was sponsored by Nancy Skinner, passed, signed by the governor, to reduce enhancements, the use of enhancements by district attorneys. So that is where the law and the will of the people are taking us. And so it is ironic to me that many people who voted for change and said they want to change, when you start to implement the actual change, then they think, oh, what's she doing? There must be something wrong. And so I'm mindful that that is not the heart. I don't believe that those people are at the core of this recall. I think the people who are at the core of the recall are racist. They are Republicans. They are folks who are a danger to our democracy. Don started this off. This recall is part of the fight for democracy because we voted. we won by 53, we won by 28,000 votes. That is no small margin. It was not close. The people said, this system is broken. It's not working. We need someone to fix it. I walked in the door on January 3rd with a mandate to fix it. And I have been under attack from that day until now by people who have their own personal agendas, some of them, and some of them, most of them have political agendas. We see that the major funding for the recall is coming from corporate developer real estate interests who don't want to see a criminal justice system that does not over criminalize Black and brown people in this community, that does not operate on economic and socioeconomic disparities. And that's at the heart of what they do not want to see. And so we have to resist that. We are saying reject the recall, decline to sign, but we've got to, it's a process. One of the ways, the features that we won, and I want to acknowledge Antoine Court, because he was the campaign navigator that successfully got the message out across all of Alameda County. I was not elected to be the district attorney of Oakland. Many people seem to think that. I am not the district attorney of Oakland. I'm the district attorney of Alameda County, which has 14 cities and 6 unincorporated areas. And we ran a countywide corporate-free campaign, meaning we talked to people all over this county. And they understood why we needed a change. It was reflected in June when we swept out Sheriff Ahern. Everybody was clear about that. He had to go, okay? And we ended up with a sheriff that none of us really knew, but we knew it was a step forward from where we were. And so that was a step forward in June. And then in November, we took another step forward. I want to talk a little bit about the office that I walked into. Unfortunately, it was a pretty unhealthy, toxic environment. There was a lot of stale technology, a lot of a lack of management, understaffing, a lack of accountability, and a failure of communication. We did a survey when we walked in the door. We had 58% participation, and people told us there were 3 things that came through over and over again. Number 1 was staffing. Number 2 was training, and number 3 was communication, and not necessarily in that order, although staffing was the most critical piece. And so we set about trying to address those issues. And so we've been very busy. I have a great leadership team and a lot of support within the organization. And so we're moving forward to fill those holes of staffing, to get the technology up to speed where a modern district attorney's office should be, and also providing training to people. The Racial Justice Act went into effect January 1st. And so we have to train all of our deputies, all of our staff on what does it mean to implement and enforce the Racial Justice Act, which what I can say is the Racial Justice Act requires that there are remedies for any case that essentially has been tainted by racial bias. And as prosecutors, we're responsible for the police if there's racial profiling from the moment that the person is encountered until the moment that they're sentenced. And anything that happens in between that person can demonstrate that there was racial bias, we as prosecutors have a duty to address that. And the court is mandated to provide certain remedies. And I want to talk about, from my perspective, what I walked into the office knowing that you elected me to be a minister of justice. And that means that I have to look at the whole picture. And that's what I said I was going to do. And I would look at crime from the perspective of someone who has been a victim of crime, from the perspective of someone who's been a victim of what I didn't consider crime, but of domestic violence, as someone who has both sued police officers and represented police officers, that I had that lens, as someone that was very familiar with the California Department of Corrections and understanding the challenges that people, returning citizens, have when they're coming out of that environment back into our communities, and the need for us to successfully and responsibly reintegrate people into our communities, and the impact that mass incarceration has had generationally on this community. And so having that understanding is the lens that I brought to the table. Um, I feel as though I have been keeping my promises. And you all will recall at the very outset of the recall, they were upset. They said, look at what she's doing. And we kept saying, well, that's what she ran on. I think that's what she said she was going to do. I said I was going to hold bad cops accountable for bad acts. And we've been doing that. We created a public accountability unit. We reopened 8 cases that we have some questions about, okay? It's not that we can prove misconduct in all of those cases, but we have some questions about them. And the way that some of them were closed suggested that they did not get a fair and thorough review. And so we reopened those cases. We are now very focused on what happened to Maurice Monk in the Santa Rita County Jail. As I was focused on Santa Rita County Jail from day one, knowing that we lead the state in custody deaths, and it's the 5th largest county jail in the country, and we don't have a sheriff's oversight committee, okay? And the board has not moved forward with that, even though the people have asked for it. And so we charged 2 officers, 2 deputies, with felony charges in connection with the death of Vanetta Martin, who committed suicide. She was a mental health patient. She was supposed to be monitored, much in the way that Maurice Monk was not, apparently. And so we charged those deputies. And now we're looking to see, how did Maurice Monk die? And we pledged to his family that we will get to the bottom of what happened. Because it's not enough that our county pays millions of dollars to the families when it just keeps happening over and over again. And I'm familiar with the lawyers who have been suing the sheriff department for decades, and nothing has changed. We know that the Department of Justice has looked at our mental health systems and how we are failing there. And so one of the first things that I did as district attorney was focus on mental health. It was restaffing and expanding our participation in the collaborative courts. I put a mental health clinician there for the first time. I reassigned 6 deputies there to begin to really find ways for us to make the mental health collaborative courts actually function the way that they're supposed to, which is making sure that we are providing avenues for treatment for people who are have drug addiction problems, alcohol addiction, as well as mental health issues. We also created a pilot program. So we've done a lot of work around the collaborative courts coming in the door. I have been implementing the criminal justice reforms that we talked about. No, we're not going to charge juveniles as adults. That's the brain science says that is inappropriate. It should not be done. Young people under the age of 26 have their brain development is not the same. It takes time. They make bad decisions. They may do the most horrendous things, but they also have the capacity to change and to become better people. Yes, they're going to pay a price. We are not just releasing juveniles who have committed heinous violent crimes. Those most violent children are housed at juvenile hall. They're in a program called Secure Track. There are some that have earned the right to go to Camp Sweeney, but that's not for the most serious offenders. The state does not have a state facility anymore. So we are having to deal with them at the county level. We have young people who have served 10 years in state prison because they received these long sentences when they were under the age of 18, and now the court has said those sentences are invalid. And so they've sent them back to us. And we have to figure out, working with probation, what to do with them. And that's a challenge. And I've assigned a special deputy just to look at those juvenile cases. And those are the ones that were already there. coming into a system with where as many of the things that Don said are having the impact on where we are now post-pandemic. We are seeing a trend of violent crime. We've seen a lot of we haven't seen a lot of carjackings lately, but we went through the worst time where there was a lot of carjackings. And if you recall, before the pandemic, you could not walk into a bank with a mask and a hoodie on. Okay. Now you can walk and you can go anywhere with a mask and a hoodie on, right? And I talked to a gas station owner, and we were talking about how the challenges that he faces. And he's like, this video camera doesn't help anything because somebody's robbing me. They got on a mask and a hoodie. You can't tell anything on a video camera. And so that is a challenge that we see in various contexts that the police are facing because times have changed. It is a new day. One of the things that I committed, my promise was to end racial disparities. And so we are doing that. I also, there were a lot of things that I said in the 10-point platform that I'm still committed to because that's what you elected me to do. These folks that are trying to overturn the election, it is an attack on our democracy. It is one that we must fight vigorously. But the way that we have chosen to fight it is about educating people, reminding them. And let me say this, and I'm going to close. When I was elected, it was we were all very active around the murder of George Floyd. The conversation in our community and across the country was about criminal justice reform. Progressive prosecutors are being elected all over the country. Now we're being attacked all over the country. And it's not like we weren't before, but now it's come to Alameda County. And make no mistake, this is part of a national movement to try to turn back the clock. When they talk about law and order and tough on crime, those are terms that came from Ronald Reagan and Dick Nixon and those folks that really were about locking up Black people. That's really what it was about. The war on drugs was a war on Black people, and they've admitted that now. And so those are the terms that were used at that time to justify that. So when you hear that, those are buzzwords. Currently, though, it is also true that the conversation has shifted from criminal justice reform to crime and punishment. And so we're back on the table in the conversation that Don says has been dominated by people who were of the mindset of tough on crime. And one of the things I talked to Chesa Boudin and I talked about for so long, the only voices in that conversation around crime and punishment were the police associations, the elected officials who were committed to the police associations, who were being funded by the police associations. And those were the only people who were talking about crime and punishment. Well, guess what? Progressive prosecutors, we talk about crime and punishment too. We talk about holding people accountable in ways that are not just one and done. It's not just we're going to lock you up and throw away the key or we're going to let you go. Those are no longer the sole choices, okay? What we talk about is restorative justice, is collaborative courts, is drug courts, is mental health courts, is mentor courts. It is we have a gun pilot program for young men that were caught with a gun for the first time. And so we are expanding the toolkit. Larry Krasner says all of the tools, we're bringing more tools to bring to bear on this problem. And that's frightening for some people because they're stuck on this is how you do it. And I stand here before you as a 40-year lawyer, and I will tell anybody who thinks they know how to do my job that you don't know how to do this job better than me. And I'm real clear about that. And so we are fighting the recall with everything we've got. We appreciate everybody who joins us in this fight. We have to educate our family, our friends, our neighbors about what is really at stake, because at the end of the day, it is our democracy. And so I'm going to end with that. Thank you. Open with questions.
Thank you so much, Pamela Price, for being here. Thanks for your remarks. We are going to transition into the discussion period. First, I'm going to turn it back over to Don to give a few comments, and then to also kick off the discussion period. And then myself and Orlando will help keep the stack, and we can take comments both verbally or in the chat. We'll open up the chat. So over to you, Don.
Thank you. Thank you, DA Price. And we appreciate you taking the time to do this. So when the Green Party heard this noise about the recall, we kind of rejected it out of hand. We rejected it without even talking to our district attorney or anything like that, because a recall, it's an important thing. It's important to have. But none of the justifications for a recall had come about. As Ms. Price described, her policies in office are the ones she ran on. You know, her own supporters continue to support her. She hasn't committed any crime or anything like that. Those would all be good reasons to recall somebody. And there hasn't been a shift really in the politics of the community in Alameda County. Basically, most people are still in agreement with this progressive tendency, and that's how we vote in a lot of things, not just for district attorney. I want to talk about the race. Frankly, Ms. Price, when a Black person starts talking about race, a lot of white people tune out. And I'm going to put it out there. I think it's that bad and then some. I think that, you know, you and your opponent were both Black, and that gets a certain amount of attention. There's a certain number of non-white progressive people in office locally. And I've heard things that people probably shouldn't have said to me. You know, sometimes white people say things to other white people, assuming an attitude that, well, but I want to talk about somebody who's worked with youth. I volunteered in Oakland and Berkeley public schools for a period of about 20 years. And I tried to work in restorative justice. I tried to work with what minimal plant programs were available for young people. And, you know, the majority of this area is Hispanic, something we all tend to forget. The majority of the people caught up in the system seem to be Black, just flat out. And I think that some of the anger and racial reaction is not so much for the elected officials in their race, but for the perpetrators and theirs. So here we have people who feel that basically a Black DA is not going to be willing to hold Black people accountable. Well, I think they project much. What we've really had is a group of people who were not held accountable, and they were not, you know, they were not the young people. And it's not those young people's parents who are pushing for a recall. That $500,000 didn't come from there. And I just really think that we have the legacy of historic racism happening here. And the things that I talked about before, the substandard schools, the lack of vocational education opportunities, the lack of jobs, the lack of good housing. You know, it's really very hard for a young person today to graduate high school, get a job, and live in an apartment. Now that's rough. That's a very limited set of choices, and that goes for all young people. Young people today are facing some severe economic and social constraints. And when we look around at who failed us, well, the California Department of Corrections fails us. People come out of the prisons that they don't even have an ID card or a bank account. People go, frankly, the state of California and the county of Alameda, not the DA's office, but the part where they really have all the money over at the supervisor's office, that's where the social services are supposed to come from. And they're not coming from there. We seem to have money to subsidize almonds in the Central Valley, but we don't seem to have money to subsidize schools in Alameda County. or any of these other things. So when people talk about this, I really would ask people to be kind of policy wonkish and think about what each level of government actually does and has for responsibilities. So with that, we're going to open it up. Our friend Orlando Johnson, who should be somewhere.
I'm right here.
You're going to. So Orlando, you're going to call on people, and also if you want to, you can put a question or a comment or whatever into the chat, and Orlando will read it out for us.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Antoine, who worked so hard to help us put this together with the district attorney, from phone calls, Lynn Johnson, the whole staff that came together to make this possible. And I'd like to give them knowledge and shout out for the phone calls we had. When it comes to our questions, let's just make it 30 seconds. We're all adults. Let's get to the point. The purpose is to protect the win. So at least let's let the questions be around protecting Pamela Price in this calls right now. And I'd like to start off with Bill, and Justin want to help me. I'm just an assistant, so Justin gonna help me out. But we'll start off with Bill.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay, thank you. I apologize that my video is not working. Thank you for being here this evening with us, Pamela. I will say that I admire you immensely and for many years, and oppose the scapegoating. But I have two questions that are not overtly about the recall. One may be, but one hat I wear is as a delegate to the Alameda Central Labor Council. And as you know, there was a motion passed, even though I didn't vote for it, but of concern in regard to staffing issues. You talked about the importance of staffing. And well, some of us felt it was a backhanded way of, adding fuel to the fire, you might say. I do think I would like to hear your response in terms of some of the concerns that the delegates from the Labor Council express. And the second is I'm also an educator, 23 years in Oakland, mainly Castlemont High School, and now part-time after semi-retiring in the city of Alameda. And considering how impactful so much of what you do is in regard to young people, are there programs either to reach out into the schools to try to explain some of what's going on? I know a lot of young people know firsthand, but still, and are there intern programs or other ways to try to get people working in your office that would help, spread the word, so to speak, about what's happening? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Hope I'm not frozen. Oh no. Am I frozen? I seem to be frozen. Can you hear me though?
We can hear you, but your video is
good.
frozen. Okay, you're
it
back now.
unfroze me. All right. Thank you, Bill. I mean, I'm not sure what all the concerns are at the Labor Council. I did meet with Keith Brown like a while ago, and he gave me a letter that said that there were some concerns. I don't quite frankly recall what that was. I can tell you that part of the ways in which progressive prosecutors have been attacked and had their administrations destabilized was through through using the employees. And in Alameda County, the Alameda County Prosecutors Association, which was formed after we ran the rates in 2018, they formed a union for the first time, and then they became part of the Teamsters. Their goal has been to destabilize our administration, and they were very clear about that. They endorsed my opponent. They raised money, funded him, contributed heavily to his campaign, fundraised amongst the deputies. He probably raised, I know he raised at least $150,000 from the deputies in the office most of them who are members of this prosecutors association that has now been fomenting antagonism against us at the Labor Council. And that's what has happened and has been a way of destabilizing progressive prosecutors. If you can say that the lawyers are not able or willing to work for the progressive DA, or the office is not able to function, then it undermines faith and public trust in the office. And that has been their mission. They, along with the media, have spread this false narrative that early on, they said, oh, she's firing all the experienced prosecutors. Well, that's fiction, total fiction. We haven't fired anybody. We placed on administrative leave, paid administrative leave, and some of these folks, all of them make over $200,000. They went on paid administrative leave. We put 6 people on leave while we investigated them for prosecutorial misconduct, because I do not want prosecutors who have been found to have committed misconduct and acted unethically in my administration. So I knew that walking in the door. We placed 6 of them on administrative leave, and they are represented by the Prosecutors Association. And so the Prosecutors Association has done everything, filing PERB charges, filing grievances, having people file complaints that we never get with the county, calling county council to complain about us, being on the media. I'm sure you've seen, if you haven't seen him, his name is Matt Finnegan. He's the labor rep for the Prosecutors Association. He has every bad thing to say about me that he could possibly say. And so that's been a tactic. And unfortunately, I hate to see that it's bled into the Labor Council, but they are part of the Teamsters. So they get to come in, and I don't get to come in and respond to any of this false narrative that the prosecutors are doing. Many prosecutors have remained at the office. We're not bleeding prosecutors is what they want us. They want people to believe all the experienced prosecutors have been fired or they've quit, and that is totally a fabrication. It's complete fiction. And we've hired some very good prosecutors. We've actually hired about, at least, I think at last count, it was over 25 lawyers, some of whom have decades of prosecutorial experience, but they're doing great work, and many of them in the civil side as well as the criminal side. On the other question that you raised around juveniles, that is not, at this time, my office does not have a strong internship program or an outreach program for young people. I formed a community support bureau, and we are anticipating staffing it, and then we will begin to engage the schools. Currently, all of juvenile justice is managed primarily by the probation department, and so they have programs. If you go to their website, they have diversion programs. They have programs for young people who have not been convicted or found to have committed a crime. And they manage young people and what happens to them in the juvenile justice system. So thank you. And hang in there. Don't let the Teamsters tell you a lie, because it's not true.
Okay, we'll go with James, then we'll go Chris, then we'll go Michael, in that order. We'll start off with James McFadden, who helped put this together with all the hard work and emails and cutting and pasting. James McFadden.
Let me interrupt for a second. Pam looks like she's trying to raise her hand the old-fashioned way. So you add her to it.
First, let me just see if you can hear me, because I sometimes have trouble. First, I want to say, hello, Ms. Price. I got to meet you. I had the pleasure of meeting you, I think, when you first ran. Before you, I think, about the time I don't know if you had declared your candidacy, but it was. I've continued to be impressed, and I'm really hope that this effort to unseat you fails miserably, and so we don't have to deal with this kind of stuff again. There was an article in Oakland Side about who was sponsoring this effort, and it looked like it was developer money, and I initially had expected it to be something other than that, and so I've been trying to make some sense out of that. It seems like that often in times where moneyed interests see problems on the left, you see an attempt to tighten efforts to clamp down on the left or on reform efforts or anything like that, because that can impact profits. And I'm just wondering if you have any kind of, if maybe that's in play here or maybe something else, but if you have any sense of what is driving this recall. I mean, somebody's going in there with big bucks. Who's what are they hoping to accomplish?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same people that funded the recall of Chesa Boudin are now at play in Alameda County. And I think they just want to get back to where Alameda County was before we got elected. Just, they probably have somebody like Brooke Jenkins waiting in the wings that they feel like will be ready to do their bidding. We don't know who that is. The main people, the face of the recall people, they're not lawyers, so it won't be one of them like it was in San Francisco. But these are the same people that funded the recall in San Francisco, and there's, it is a political objective, and their agenda is to overturn the election.
Okay, you got it, James?
Yeah, but let me just add one thing, because I just kind of wonder, is it just more of a Democratic Party control, since Democratic Party controls most of it, is it sort of the deep pockets in the Democratic Party, or is it something from out that's bigger than that?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I mean, we know the Republican Party is small, but they are very coalesced around being part of the recall. It is true that the deep pockets in the Democratic Party and the mainstream Democrats they supported my opponent, no question about it. They wanted him to win, and they did not want to see this kind of change. I mean, I think the challenge is that they have, in many ways, on criminal justice reform, they lost the battle at the legislature, right? Because the laws kept coming, even SB 81. The laws changed and kept coming from, I remember when Holly Mitchell and Shirley Weber, they won those battles at the state level. And so they created the foundation for the implementation of criminal justice reform. So having lost that battle at the state level, it makes sense to me that the major donors and the big money people that we see funding this recall would adopt it as a strategy to go after folks at the local level.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll go Chris Cutter, Michael, and Debbie. Chris, you on board. Chris Cutter. Unmute yourself, please, Chris.
For some reason, my name is coming up, Chris. This is David Wofford.
How you doing, David? Welcome aboard.
Okay.
Well, Chris, whoever you are, I don't know what's happening here, but hi. Thank you for your wonderful service, Pamela, Ms. Price, DA Price, and before I begin, Debbie, I can look like she's right behind me. Let me say, go public bank. We got, I want to stand up for the public bank. Okay, so my father's John George, Wilson Riles Jr., and Chappelle Hayes were political operatives, and they raised me up here as political operatives in Oakland. And so the way I see it, this is not as much about Pamela Price per se, as it is about the maintaining of a momentum. And so you know, if it was one of us in that seat, they'd be after us just as well, given the way that we think and the things that we want to accomplish. But having said that, I want to say that what do we do about that? And this is what I'm getting to my question here. It's these are like there's so many people that I meet and neighbors who are caught up in this, and when I hear them talk and hear how their minds think, I think, well, how can I educate them out of this? And I was able to make it to the meeting up in Montclair, and I saw your presentation there. And I thought to myself, if everybody in the city could see this presentation and hear this, that would be great. Because then we get a basis for, forgive me, my camera, but we get a basis for conversation. There's so much misinformation out there and so much misunderstanding about what crime is, where it comes from, and how to deal with it, that my question to you would be, how could I take your presentation on the road, if you will, and get it instituted, so to speak? It's more a fundamental part of the process of the experience of being here in Oakland. If you're a county employee, well, this may be out of your purview, or a city employee, why couldn't part of your orientation packet include information about how the city of Oakland, what its history has been? And I even have begun to call together information that could be used for that. There's like 2 pages from the book, The Writers Come Out at Night, that talk about the evolution, just 2 pages, a few paragraphs. But again, to put this in a nutshell and communicate it with the broader public, I would like to share my mission about that with you and the support of your office in that endeavor.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. I mean, you know, The Writers Come Out at Night, The Color of Law, there's certain things about our community that should be mandatory reading for, you know, those who come into public service, but that's unfortunately not the rule. And I don't have any, I mean, my ability, I don't have the ability to control that. What I try to do with my employees internally, certainly as we bring people on board, we are talking to them about, you know, Brian Stevenson's work, as well as the grand jury report, which trying to set a level of ethics, as well as we've done education on the Racial Justice Act. We've started with all supervisors, and we're going to be going through all employees, and we tell them, look, this is the legacy of Alameda County. For the DA's office, though, it kind of has you have to understand there's an undercurrent, because we do have a lot of career employees who have been there forever, and they have been part of this system. And so they don't like hearing, it's not, you know, it takes them aback. It makes them feel like they've been doing something wrong, which they sort of maybe have been, you know. I mean, but certainly they were complicit in a system, and even maybe they didn't know. But it was a system that has had a terrible impact on this community. And that is hard to think that I was a part of that for 30 years. So it's, you know, there's challenges there for us internally.
Well, okay, if I may ask the group's permission, well, if I can, I'm a member of the Lake Merritt Breakfast
Not to
Club.
be rude, Mr. David Walford, we're on the time limit. So
Yeah.
we have the next speaker up. Can you put it in the chat and we can follow up, or we can put it in the email for you and we can get it to Ms. Price?
Okay.
Thank you. Don't skip over Pam. She's got
Pam Specs. We apologize for Pam. I didn't see your hand, but out of all due respect, can we go with Pam Speck and then go to Michael D. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Orlando, for I unmute myself. I have a kind of another issue who has come to my mind about the people who are arrested and cannot afford bail bonds. They happen to be poor people and usually more, I think, Black than any other. And I was wondering, I know there's some things up, I think, in the state county to change that law somehow. Do you have any power in that area or any advice or opinion, please?
Sure. I have a lot of opinions and very little power to match my opinions. We have been developing a policy on bail. I have said very clearly money bail, as I understand it, by the ruling of the California Supreme Court, money bail is unconstitutional. I was involved in a couple of the bail measures that were brought to the state legislature and involved in that conversation. And then we know that the proposition failed. But the Supreme Court has declared, and we are lawyers, so therefore we are bound by that, that money bail is unconstitutional in the manner in which it has been applied in Alameda County and most places across the state. And so we have been looking at, we filed a brief just last week, an amicus brief in a bail case that's pending before the California Supreme Court that we hope will clarify what the standards are and how it's supposed to be implemented. There's been a lot of inconsistencies in Alameda County. It depends on what judge you get. Some judges are completely ignoring the Humphreys decision, which said that you can't, if a person lacks the ability to pay, that is a factor to be considered. Some judges are, the judges I'm told are all over the place. And so as we have looked at our bail policy, we've been mindful of trying to come up with something that doesn't increase incarceration and also balances public safety. And I can tell you that part of our hindrance is something that got touched on earlier. Under the current sort of restrictions or the challenges that the Prosecutors Association has presented has made it difficult for us to design and develop a policy. Because one of the things that we did early on was when we were doing our first policy around charging, we talked to the charging deputies. We wanted to know what were the practices, how were people trained, what was their understanding. And the Prosecutors Association filed an unfair labor practice charge saying we were violating PERB. And so now we understand that in order for us to be able to design a bail policy, we have to sit down with them and talk to them. We can't talk to our deputies about that directly. And so it's been a challenge getting them to come to a meeting, tell us something, because they don't really know. So that's a whole nother story. I will say that I'm very clear and was clear walking in the door that culture eats policy for lunch. And so as we have 144 lawyers in 9 different locations around the county, I cannot, and it would be poor judgment on my part to simply say this is the policy and think that everybody's going to follow it, because that's not how it works, right? And so we've been doing a lot of work around how do you change the culture and how do you bring people to the understanding that this policy, if it's coming out, that this is the best thing to do. So we're working through that. Hopefully by next year, we will have gone through satisfied the Prosecutors Association that they got to say whatever it was they wanted to say, and then we can start rolling out a bail policy because it's sorely, sorely needed. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, Debbie, Don, and Joanne. Michael, please.
Thank you, Pamela, for all your answers. They've been really interesting to me. I have one comment and 2 questions. My comment is that I was shopping at a supermarket in the Fruitvale, and there were 2 people outside with petitions, and one of them said, "Come sign my petition and help fight crime. Pamela Price is weak on crime." And I argued with him and I said, "No, you're wrong. Pamela is the best DA that we've ever had." And the other petitioner said, "Well, come sign my petition." my petition is for Pamela Price. So I went over to that person, kind of skeptical because I hadn't heard about a pro Pamela Price petition. And I carefully read the petition, and it was the exact same no on Pamela Price, recall you petition. So these people were lying, and I'd like to inform everybody to be careful about the lies that are being spread by these petitioners who are probably working for $10 a signature, but they're lying in order to get people to recall you. My
Absolutely.
first question is, when is the recall election? And my second question is, how do you relate to the police in general? I know the sheriff's is an Alameda County department, so you relate directly to them. But how do you relate to cops in Oakland or Fremont or Hayward or Dublin or Emeryville? Those are my two questions. And thank you very much, Pamela, for your work.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to co-sign what he said. These people are lying. They are lying to our friends and our neighbors. They will say anything to say. I mean, there's one of the lies that say, I let the people who shot Jasper Wu go. It's like, no, they're facing 175 years to life, and the other guy is facing 265 years to life. Who said? I mean, they will say anything, and that is, you know, a feature, unfortunately, of the radical right, is that there are no boundaries. The truth is not in them. And so it's very difficult. There is no recall unless they get enough signatures. And so that's why we are launching our Protect the Win campaign to stop people from signing. And yes, letting people know this is a lie. What is fact? What is fiction? And that they are getting paid $10 a signature. The paid signature gatherers have actually left Alameda County. They stopped this past Thursday because the recall folks ran out of money. Okay. So they're not, the paid people are gone, and they won't come back unless they can raise enough money to bring them back. But in the meantime, so we're still dealing with folks that have, that want to go back to the status quo, that did not vote for me, and they will tell you, I didn't vote for her. And so therefore, they want to nullify the votes of the people who did vote for me. So there will be no recall. They do have until March the 5th to try to get these signatures. So we have to fight until then. And then the second thing, I am a member of the Alameda County Association of Chiefs of Police and the Sheriff. And from January 2023, one of the first things I had to do was go and participate in a 3-day conference with all of the police chiefs of all of the 14 cities and the sheriff. And we meet monthly. I also made it a priority for my administration to meet with every chief of police, along with their mayor or their city administrator and their city attorney. And so I've done that. And there's only 2 cities that I have not met with the leadership of the city, which includes the police. And so my office is I have a chief of inspectors who also is a 30-year retired cop, and I work with him, and we work at the highest level with all of the chiefs and the sheriff. The sheriff is part of the county. There's some interesting dynamics because I'm holding the sheriff's department accountable. And county, in that regard, I can't rely on county council because she represents the sheriff. So we're in uncharted territory where you have a district attorney that actually holds people accountable. Trust me. But we're meeting that challenge and we're taking it on. I have lawyers internally and externally that are advising me. In terms of my relationships with the chiefs, with few exceptions, has been professional, respectful. I approach them very straightforwardly, and they know that, I don't always agree with what they say, and they don't agree with most of what I say, but I'm okay with that because my comment to them and my my relationship with them is that I tell them, I cannot tell you how to do your job unless you violate the Constitution. Then that's another thing. But as long as you are managing your employees and doing your job, I'm not the police chief of Oakland or Fremont or anybody. I'm not even a cop. I didn't go to the academy. I am a lawyer, and I can't tell you how to do your job, and you cannot tell me how to do mine. And as long as we respect those lines, we'll be fine. And so far we have been, with a few exceptions. The Livermore chief kind of got out of line, but he'll be all right.
Okay, and Debbie, you can unmute.
Thank you. And thank you, DA Price, for all your hard work and for your time on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening. We appreciate that. Don asked us to be wonky, and I think I might win the Wonky Question Award. I understand that the Alameda County Board of Supervisors is working on changing how recalls work in the county. And I understand that if that goes through, it will make it somewhat harder for the opposition to unseat you. But I wondered if you could say a little bit about that.
We are in very uncharted territory. The charter is incomplete and outdated, but the only way the charter can be changed is through the will of the voters. There has to be a majority of the voters. The board cannot change the charter. Although county council has decided parts of the charter she won't enforce, such as allowing people who are not registered voters here to come here. The charter says that's not supposed to happen, but county council and the registrar of voters said, oh, we're not going to enforce that part of the charter. So that's why we got all these paid signature gatherers from Michigan and LA and these people running around who know nothing about Alameda County and could care less and just wanted $10. They opened the door for that, even though the charter says no. The ordinance that they're passing, then I believe they will pass it, that will change the way recalls are managed, is essential because the registrar of voters cannot count the votes within 10 days, which is what the charter requires. He just physically cannot do that. And so they're trying to fix it so he doesn't have to do that. Now, it's going to be up in the air because the recall folks have until March the 5th. The ordinance is on the ballot, on the primary ballot in March, and the ordinance won't go into effect until after the time which they submit their signatures. So it's unclear if he can't, if the ordinance is not in effect at the time that he receives the signatures, then he still has 10 days. That will make it impossible because he can't count it. He cannot certify the election within 10 days. The charter also requires them to have the election, I think, within a very short period of time. I forget what it is, but the state rules allow a much longer period of time. They can't do it within the period of time that's authorized by the charter. So it may be all of this could easily be for naught because the registrar is just, the charter has never been used. You know, we've never had a recall. And so their effort is now requiring the examination of the charter and an amendment of the charter, and all of that is trying to happen at the same time. And so it's just a big mess. I mean, they may not ever be able to get this certified because of the interplay between the charter and the state elections code. But we're in totally uncharted territory. No, my understanding is if the ordinance passes, it'll be effective immediately, but it would need to be effective retroactively to save the registrar. And if it's retroactive for the registrar, then it should also be retroactive for us, which means then they need another 20,000 signatures. So it's a big mess.
Thank you. Thank you, and I'm sorry.
It's a mess. But let me say what David said. This is not about me, okay? It could be anybody on this call that was in this seat. One of the things that we understand, this is about power, okay? and who holds power in Alameda County. And there has always been, from my understanding of the history of Alameda County, there has always been this teeter-totter between the reactionary right forces, the conservative moneyed interests in Alameda County, and the progressive left. And so when people talk to me about, well, Oakland is the home of the Black Panther Party. Well, yes, it's also the home of the most reactionary, racist, conservative Republicans who owned City Hall and controlled this office and the county for decades. And so these things don't exist in a vacuum. And what we're experiencing, this backlash, is from some people who actually are residents here and who are disturbed at the power that now is being controlled by a Black progressive woman who is not afraid. That's terrifying to many people.
Yes. And Don McClay, then.
And then Joanne, right? I have an editorial thing to say, a political thing. I don't know if it requires an answer. And then I would like to ask you something not related to the recall, but related to your work. The editorial thing is, there's a few things that this country kind of does better than others, like separation of church and state. You don't want to live somewhere that doesn't have separation of church and state. And you also don't want to live somewhere that doesn't have civilian control over the military. And that's kind of sounds wonky, but it really means that the people with the votes are in charge of the people with the guns. And I'm glad that those police officers are polite with you, but you're elected and they are not. And we do not want to have a situation where people who are in the, police force is kind of a military, and they should not be dictating to the people we elect what they do. And I see things like the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, so-called. And, I think anytime we go down that track where the police get to dictate to the politicians, we're in trouble. That's not how it works. It is an honor and it is a privilege to walk around with a gun and a badge. And it's something that you have to be responsible to the community. And you do that by being responsible to our elected officials. So enough of my pontificating there. I'd like you to just switch and forget the damn recall for a minute here. Let's just talk about what you're doing. I'd like to hear what you're doing with restorative justice, how you're implementing it, how many people, how many offenders have been able to be, addressing their situation that way, and is it going to grow? What's the story there?
Sure. And thank you, Don. Let me address the restorative justice. And I do need to tell you that the police have been very much in charge of our politicians for a few decades now. And that's part of the problem, is that the police, every city and county with a POA has been captive to the political themes of law enforcement. And that was one thing that was different in my election, was that I was not, I was opposed by the POAs. And, it was unusual for someone who was opposed by the POAs to actually win, but we did. Restorative justice, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, it feels to me like we've gone backwards in Alameda County. We are the home of restorative justice. I remember when Our Joy was founded, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth was founded, and it prospered, and it was growing, and it became a national model, and it grew. And we still have Our Joy. We also have something called Community Works West. And Community Works West worked with, was an outgrowth of Our Joy, and took on the bringing restorative justice to the criminal justice system through our juvenile justice system. And they had a contract, and they were doing great work. and then the grant that they were funded by expired before I got there, and now their work in juvenile justice is limited to a very small number of Oakland youth only. So they don't have the funding to provide services to youth unless you're an Oakland resident. And that is really unfair and unfortunate, but it's that's their funding. We applied for a grant for them to be able to do some work where we would do the work and they would get part of the money. And unfortunately, we didn't get that one. We're looking to do another one next year. We have another grant application pending. So right now, the sort of engagement for restorative justice in the juvenile justice system is very limited, and it's gone backwards from where it was. It never existed in the adult criminal system. I hired the first restorative justice director and created a restorative justice unit. And that unit has been in process, in formation. We do not currently have the capacity to offer restorative justice to victims. And we've had several families that have come to us that have asked for restorative justice. They asked my predecessor and they got nowhere, and now they've come to us. Now they've heard about it, and they did come to us, but we were not in a position to engage them or to create a process. I met with Community Courts West and Impact Justice and a number of the restorative RJOY, a number of restorative justice folks, a couple of times this year to try to get something going. And the director of our restorative justice unit, Damaris Evans, she's got the outlines on the table, but it has not been effectuated yet. And, it's in large part, again, due to staffing. Damaris heads up now the public accountability unit, the resentencing and the reentry unit, the Racial Justice Act unit, as well as the restorative justice unit. And so we're still getting to where we can staff that up. And at the moment, our ability to do that is we have a budget for lawyers, but we have to recruit the lawyers who are willing and able to do that work. The number of non-lawyer staff positions that can fill those kind of positions is fairly limited within the DA's office, within our budget. So we're working through that. We got some stuff on the table. We've been in conversation with people. Everybody knows we're trying to get this thing set up. And Damaris actually worked on the restorative justice unit in San Francisco. So we're very fortunate to have her as someone who has done this work, has created this program, and I'm confident she'll do it. But it'll be next year before it rolls out.
Due to time constraint, the DA got a busy week coming up. We'll let Joanne be the last question and answer. We thank everyone for showing. Like we said again, put it in the chat or send an email so we can continue working with the district attorney, not just on this Protect the Wind, but for other great programs that's being created in Alameda County. Go ahead, Joanne.
Hi. I just want to let you know you have really clarified so much tonight, because I've run into people both on Nextdoor, which I just left it alone, but and then outside of Walmart. And I purposely walked by this guy so he could ask me to sign, and I said, no way. I said, I like Pamela, she's doing her job. And I just thought, well, what do I do to convince people? Because I didn't really understand enough about their complaints actually until tonight. So I really thank you for that. And I do want to know how you would handle it. I wanted to go in and tell Walmart, why are you letting, ask them, why are you letting people be out here like this? And anyway, I had kind of an inkling of what their problem was, but I didn't really totally understand it. So, and FASME, of course, I had introduced you to them because I really believe in your ability to help the mentally ill. And so I want to stand behind you and I want to know what I can do
Thank you.
to help.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Joanne. Yes, and thank you for all you're doing for our community and for FAFSA and for everybody on here. I mean, we are here because we care. And it is so important that we continue to care about the people who are, being misled and not sure and don't know, they believe what they heard in the media, and understand that all of this was media driven. And the media was very much behind it at the outset. They got into it, as someone said, they had a thirst for it because it worked in San Francisco and it was a great story, right? It was a great drama from the start of the recall through the recall. I mean, it just was fascinating for them. And think about it, as we sit here a year ago, we were waiting with bated breath for the final numbers to come out, and the media wasn't covering this race. They didn't care about it. Nobody was following our race at all. They didn't have my phone number. They didn't expect me to do interviews. I mean, all of everything suddenly changed after we won. And it changed because I am, what do you call it? Clickbait. And unfortunately, we're in a season where if you say Pamela Price recall, click, people want to know what's happening. And so the media is making money, and it's driven by that. In that the instance, our strategy is across the board. Yes, you should tell Walmart management, if you come to a place, whether it's Walmart, Target, Safeway, we have now complained to all of them and sent them letters saying, how are you letting these people harass your customers? Because that's what they're doing. They're blocking the doors. We've had people threatened. And they wouldn't let us do that if we were, I couldn't campaign at Walmart, so you have to hold the management of these big box stores because that's where people go. Walgreens, CVS, they know people are coming there. And so they have to be, the management needs to be made aware that you object. And if you object, then the management, because most of the stores do have policies, anti-solicitation policies. Once you object, then they know, oh, I don't want somebody to be able to say they went to corporate and I didn't do anything about it. So that will force them, and that will force them to be fair about it and to follow their own policies. Also, if you're going to be on Nextdoor, we say to people, take someone with you, okay? Nextdoor is a pretty toxic place, and for your own mental health, you want to have somebody in there with you. But we do need people in conversation with our friends and our neighbors on Nextdoor, on Reddit, on the horrible X, which has just become the toilet place of America. It's just crazy. And I don't advocate so much for X because, as someone pointed out, most of the people on there who are attacking us are not real people. They are bots. And they're using AI to create these fake accounts and narratives. So you can't win on X. We urge people to follow the DA official official Facebook and the official Twitter X account for the DA account, because I can't put people off of there, which means I need people to come on there to really fight those fights there. And otherwise, it's about educating people, fact versus fiction. We're getting ready to publish a list of fact versus fiction. It is a fiction that we are not prosecuting cases. We are charging people. We have 35 charging deputies in 7 locations across the county. It is fiction that we are not charging enhancements. We are charging enhancements, sometimes pretty serious enhancements. And there are over 200 enhancements available to a prosecutor in California. And so we have to look at a variety of the factors. The one thing that was never considered, but the Sentencing Commission has said you must look at the individual's criminal history and the individual themselves. And when I walked in that office, I would get synopsis of crimes that were committed, and it was the victim and the defendant. Nobody had names. When I said to the deputy, tell me how old this person was, there was like a blank look, like, oh, well, let me go find that, tell me, what is the person's criminal history? Well, they're just a repeat offender, but what does that mean, right? The evaluation of people is at the heart of how you have to apply enhancements. It's the things that we look at in particular, it's both the person who committed the crime, it's also a vulnerable victim and extraordinary circumstances. An example, my deputies, most of the charging of Oakland and Berkeley all of it happens at Wiley Manual, with few exceptions. The charging, I often get requests from those folks at Wiley Manual, and one day I got a request to charge someone who had shot someone, and because he used a gun, he's eligible for a 25, an enhancement of, so homicide is 25 to life, and then you can add an enhancement of 25 to life. So you double the sentence, basically. And I said to the deputy, tell me what the vulnerable victim is, what the exceptional circumstances. Well, we don't really know who the victim was. It's unidentified. So you can't tell me it's a vulnerable victim. What's exceptional about this? Well, it was a Tuesday afternoon outside the BART station. Okay, Tuesday is exceptional. The BART station is exceptional. What are you telling me? I mean, really? You're a grown-up. You're a lawyer, okay? You're a 30-year lawyer. Tell me something other than it was a Tuesday afternoon at BART that I would double someone's sentence from 25 years to life to serve 50 years to life. And they couldn't tell me that. And so that's the kind of evaluation and the assessment that we have to do, but we're doing it. When it comes to me, it's already gone through 5 levels of review, and it starts with the police. They do the investigation. They can make a recommendation. That's all it is. At the end of every police report, it says, we recommend this charge. They don't know. They don't know about Penal Code 654. They don't know, how the sentencing, they just don't know, because they're not lawyers. So then it goes to the charging deputy. They make an analysis. Then that person hands it off to the arraignment deputy. They make an analysis. Then that person is supposed to go to the supervisor. And then the supervisor is supposed to go to my chief assistant, and then it's supposed to come to me. So I'm trying to train people in the office how to evaluate cases. I mentioned earlier, the 2017 Sentencing Commission was the first time that anyone in California had looked at our sentences and at our enhancements in decades. And so now we know what the people have voted for, we know what the legislature has said, and we've got to train the lawyers who now have to implement it, how to do it. And so that's my job, a lot of my job. But I have 450 employees, people. So I am every day trying to make sure that I'm providing the facilities for them, that I'm keeping a safe workplace for them, that they're getting fair promotions and training, and doing everything I can to make this organization, to improve it so that it will provide better service to the residents of Alameda County. Thank you.
Okay. So we're coming to a close here. I'd like to thank all the participants, because without you, there's no show. And thanks Justin and Orlando for running the board and moderating. And I thank DA Price for having come here and made the time to explain herself and answer our questions. And I'd like to leave us on this note. I'm one of those people who's really sick and tired of having the right wing set the agenda. The recall is not the agenda. What Pamela was telling us, sorry, I keep calling you Pamela. Pamela and I were on a first name basis before she became a big DA, right? You know, what she's talking about with restorative justice, that's something we can put our time into and we could work on. There's a police commission. When we talk about police accountability, there's places where we can do things that are positive. We should not be letting the recall people decide where our time goes. And I think we should, as a community, think about really what it is that our youth needs, what it is our community needs, and engage, right? And that's what I'll leave that as my final note. Thank you, everyone.
I want to invite you all to this Thursday, Protect the Win at Fluid 510 at 6 p.m. So please come out. We're going to gather, we're going to lunch, and we'll sign people up to go with Joanne to Walmart. All right.
Will there be food?
Yes, there will be food and drink. Yes. All right then. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.